Welcome to my class. And as it is my first class with you on Robinson Crusoe, which belongs to 18th century fiction, I just like to, at the very inception, know from you uh, what do you know about fiction? Or how can you define a fiction? Can you share your ideas about fiction? You may also mention some characteristics of a fiction. Any of you, please, the floor is open for you.
The fiction is a narrative or creative work uh, which may create from the human imagination.
Poetry is also a creation of human imagination. So, how can you differentiate fiction from poetry? Or even fantasy tale, science fiction is also a creation of human imagination. So, how can you differentiate a fiction from poetry? Anybody else? You may share your ideas about fiction. What is fiction?
তার পোয়েট্রিতে তো রিদম থাকে, রাইম থাকে, আর ফিকশন তো এসব মেনটেন করা হয় না।
So, I am sorry, I can't accept your answer. Because if you read the fiction, for example, The Suitable Boy, written by Bikram Sheth, he will find rhythms there. So you can't say that a fiction is distinct from poetry only in terms of the absence of rhythm or absence of meter. This is not a distinctive characteristic that can differentiate a fiction from a piece of poetry. So anyway, I think you have to know all these terms and terminologies very clearly, confidently. You must not speak from your anticipation. At first, you have to have a very serious study, and then you can confidently answer to the questions. So anyway, fiction or novel, if you go to E.M. Forster, Edward Morgan Foster, a 20th century novelist and very famous for his canonical fiction, A Passage to India. It's a fiction, one of the fictions that he produced about his experience in this Indian subcontinent during the colonial era. So, in his book, Aspects of Novel, this is the name of the book, and you will find the definition of a novel of fiction given by Edward Morgan Forster or E.M. Forster. So, how does he define a novel? He has said that a novel is a fiction. Fiction means a story from imagination that you have said. But remember, you can also have story from imagination in poetry. For example, in Rime of the Ancient Mariner, written by S.T. Coleridge, you will find a story of the ancient mariner, but it's called a ballad. It is not a fiction, but you will find a fictional story there, the story of an ancient mariner who, along with his comrades, went to the South Sea, and there he experienced some unexpected incidents. And he survived, though his other comrades died. So you will find fiction in poetry also. You will find fiction in epic. Even in dramas, you may find fictions. Now, what is novel? Novel is also a fiction, but it is written in prose, number one. In novel, you will find characters, you will find a story, you will also find plot, and you will also find denouement. So these are the aspects that E.M. Forster has mentioned, and he has defined novel. That is, novel is a fiction to a certain extent, fiction in prose to a certain extent. To a certain extent means how extent? A novel may be a fiction of 50,000 50,000 words. It may be a story from imagination of 50,000 words or more than 50,000 words. Okay. If it is below 50,000, then we can call it novella. And you will find lots of novellas in English literature. For example, Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. It's a novella. Okay. Because it is not voluminous in size. But you will find many or lots of fictions voluminous in size. That is more than 50,000 words, or even more than 150,000 words. So anyway, in fiction, you will find a story. Now, what is story? Story is a narrative of incidents and events. And these incidents and events are organized in terms of time sequence. Okay, so what is story? For example, let me give you an example. Suppose in the morning, we take breakfast. So if you say, I take breakfast in the morning, it is a story. So why? Because we find here one incident. What's that incident? Taking breakfast. And what's the time? Morning. So the incident of taking breakfast aligns with the morning. You cannot say, I take my breakfast in the evening, because evening does not align with the incident of taking breakfast. Okay, so in this way, we find that a story is a narrative. It's a description of incidents and events in close association with time sequence. So you will find a story in fiction. Then you will also find plot. So what is plot? E.M. Forster has defined plot with a very interesting example. He has said, suppose the king, just think, the king dies. And out of great shock, the queen dies. This is an example of a plot because one incident happens in consequence with the other incident. That's why we call it plot. So plot is the combination of cause and effect. So you will find plot in a fiction. Okay. You will also find plot in a drama. If you have any experience of studying Shakespearean dramas or other dramas, I think you are well acquainted with these terms, that is story, plot, or plot construction, or climax, catastrophe, etc. These are the terms that you usually hear while studying dramas. So you will find plot, you will also find a story there in fiction. And then he will also find characters. Without characters, the story cannot move forward because the incidents and events do not happen automatically or supernaturally. Incidents and events happen because of the involvement of human beings, of some characters. So the characters take the incidents and events ahead. So there must be characters in a fiction. And ultimately, he will find denouement, that is, he will find a satisfactory conclusion. He will also find their poetic justice. Poetic justice means apportionment of rewards and punishment exactly according to the merits and defects of the character. So let me simplify. Suppose you are a good person, you do good, so you will be rewarded for your goodness. Or suppose a person is an evildoer, he does evil, so he will be punished. So this kind of distribution of punishment and reward is known as poetic justice. And literature, by instinct, is moral. Literature usually motivates the readers to do good things. And the function of a literature is to make the world better. That is, after reciting a text or after reading a text, you will feel inspired to do good jobs, to do good to the humanity. That is the target of our fiction, especially literature, not only fiction, every sort of literature. If anybody asks you what is the objective of literature, the objective of literature is to make the world better. That is, after reading your text, you will feel that that is a bad job, so we should avoid it. And this is a good job, we should do it. Why should we do it? We should do it for the betterment of our society, of humankind. So anyway, these are the elements that we usually find in fiction. Now, in 18th century fiction, you will find uh, stories from imagination. You will also find characters, and you will find rationalism in 18th century fiction. There must be imagination. Imagination is a must, but the incidents and events that happen there in the plot of fiction are highly logical, not illogical, but logical. This is called rational development of the story of the plot, rational development. So you will find there rational stories, the stories that can be explained reasonably, that can be explained logically. So you will find the reflection or manifestation of human reasons or human uh, rationality there in fiction. Not only that, 18th century fiction is also remarkable for its moral tone. 18th century fiction usually warns that the society should be good because 18th century experienced corruption. If you read history of England of 18th century or even 17th century, you will find how corruption is spread just like mushroom in various corners of the society, English society. It was also a period of political corruption. economic exploitation, and moral degeneration. So, why? What factors triggered all these bad things? You may question. Actually, it happened because of the rise of capitalism. It happened because of the rise of mercantile activities. It happened because of the spread of industrialization. So these are the major incidents which triggered corruption in English society in 16th, in 17th and 18th centuries. And you will also find that in 18th century, English merchants went to different parts of the world and they ran business there. They went to different parts of the world to run business. They made money. They were also running after plantation, colonial enterprises. They went to different parts of the world. They started agriculture there. They produced crops there. And they brought raw materials to England for their mills and factories. So 18th century was a century which brought the English merchants and English navigators in contact with diverse people of the world, diverse societies of the world, or diverse communities of people, diverse languages of the world. So 18th century was distinctly very conspicuously remarkable because it brought English merchants, navigators, and explorers in contact with diverse communities of people of the world. And it was also a century of adventure. You can also call it a century of adventure. So, why? Because English merchants went to different islands of Caribbean or Mediterranean Sea or even Caribbean islands. They were very much interested in far countries. They went there and they ran business. They made money. And they also had cultural, linguistic, and uh, epistemic exchange. That is, they used to exchange their views, their knowledge, their philosophy, their ideas. So 18th century was remarkable for the spread of British colonial power in many parts of the world. So adventure was an inherent characteristic of 18th century England. So keep it in mind. It's an important aspect of this period that you will find being reflected in 18th century fictions. And Robinson Crusoe is not an exception because you will also find, even in its core, the spirit of adventure. And it will also, after reading this text, start calling it a colonial text because it motivates colonial enterprise. Robinson Crusoe, the protagonist, whom he will meet from the very first page of this text, represents himself as a colonial master. And he will also find some local characters, for example, Friday, a Negro native, who is in contrast with Robinson Crusoe, is depicted as a slave. So you will also find here master slave binary. So England is manifesting itself as a master, and rest of the world, which is represented by Friday, is considered to be the slave. So just think it's a very serious text because this very text helps you interpret the colonial realities that many parts of the world encountered in 18th century, even in 19th century, or even in 20th century, as we experienced. East India Company came here and ruled this subcontinent for 190 years. They did never consider us to be their equal. They considered us to be their subservients or inferior subjects, and they were the master. They always placed themselves on our head. We were always at the bottom, and they were at the top. So Robinson Crusoe represents that very colonial master, colonial power, colonial hegemony. Hegemony means power. And on the other hand, you will find some characters who are not British by nationality or by blood. These characters represent the colonized people of the world. So anyway, I do actually refer to this colonial uh, enterprise or colonial discourse only to draw your attention to the study of colonialism or to the study of even our history, because we have also had an experience of colonialism. So read this text very seriously. And the story superficially may be very interesting. You may enjoy it because this text is widely read all over the world as a child's story, as a child or children's text. Children enjoy it because you will find or you will feel the pulse of expedition here in this text. So it may make you fanciful, it may make you imaginative, it may beckon you to the land of imagination. You may feel interested in sea adventure superficially, but if you dig deeper, you will feel or you will find that this text is a very, very serious text and it helps you interpret your own condition. It helps you understand the realities which shape your identity. It also inspires you to look back at your history and explore your history. Question the colonial power or the colonial masters. So I think this very text is a seminal text. It's a canonical text that helps us understand colonial discourse or the colonial realities that we experienced, the people of this Indian subcontinent experienced for 190 years. Anyway, let me come to the next slide. You will find some major characteristics of 18th century fiction. But before going to interpret all these points, I just like to express my acknowledgement to different sources of websites, of electronic medias, Google, or even ChatGPT. So I express my gratitude and acknowledgement to all these sources from which or from where I have collected all these informations and materials. And I do also ask you to explore different areas of electronic media so that you can have updated informations that may help you uh, to be enlightened. Anyway, major characteristics of 18th century fiction: realism and verisimilitude. So writers focused on ordinary individuals. In 18th century fiction, you will find the stories of ordinary people. They are not kings and queens. They are very ordinary people. Even they may be maidservants. In Pamela, you will find a maidservant to be the protagonist of that text. That is not the story of a queen or exceptionally sophisticated people. That's a story of an ordinary maidservant. Or suppose Robinson Crusoe that you are going to study. This Robinson is a boy of an upper middle class family. He is not a prince, he is not a king, he is not a general of an army. He is a civilian. So that's why I have said that 18th century fiction is dedicated to telling the stories of ordinary individuals. And the approach is very realistic. That's why I have written here using realistic names, detailed geographical settings, believable everyday conflicts rather than heroic or mythical tales. So in 18th century fiction, you will find realistic stories, not fictitious stories, okay? You will find realistic stories. You will also find dates and days. And you may feel that this is a tale from history. You may feel while reciting a fiction. Suppose in Robinson Crusoe, you will find that the writer, Daniel Defoe, has mentioned dates, different years, and he has also maintained a calendar. So after reciting it, you may feel, oh, it's a very rational, a realistic story, because you find there the dates, the days, the years. That is, the author is mentioning all these very important or essential ingredients, essential for making a story realistic. But actually, all these dates, days, calendars are also the fabrications of the author, concoctions of the author. So never think that it is from history. But it seems to be a piece of history. Why? Why does the author use these ingredients? The author uses these ingredients to make the fiction realistic. So just think of the term fiction, realistic, or realistic fiction. I have used here an oxymoron. Fiction means a tale from imagination. And while I say realistic or realism, this is not imagination. It is a fact. So you will find this oxymoron. Oxymoron means the placing two contrasted words side by side. For example, delightful death. Death is never delightful, but if you say delightful death, this is an example of oxymoron. It's a figure of speech and very popularly used and widely used in many pages of poetry. Even in Bengali literature, you will find, for example, Shukher Moron, that is peaceful death, a delightful death. So anyway, when I say realistic fiction, you will find oxymoron here. It's a fiction, but some dates and days are used to make this story believable. It's a technique, remember. It's a narrative technique. Because the age is advancing, Every moment you have to fight with different limitations of your life. You feel hungry, so you need to buy food for yourself. You need to buy your own dress. You need to buy even your oxygen if you go to hospital with critical condition, and if you need oxygen, you have to buy the oxygen there. If you want to use a public toilet, you have to pay for it. So you are living in a highly realistic world. Nothing is free. Or suppose in the room where you are now sitting, suppose the light is burning there, a bulb is lighting there. So you have to pay electricity bill for that. So nothing is free. Life is highly realistic. And if I tell you a fictitious story, you may not believe it. You may not feel interested in it. And if I want to make you feel interested in my story, I have to create an environment of realism. Actually, that was the purpose of 18th century fiction, just to create a realistic atmosphere and make the readers more interested. Surrealism is an important characteristic of 18th century fiction. Then rise of middle class. As I have already told you that 18th century fiction is not the story of kings or queens or princes. This is a story of ordinary individuals. And in most of the fictions of 18th century, you will find protagonists from the middle class family or even lower class. For example, in Pamela, you will find a maidservant, a girl from a lower class background. And then the next one, didacticism and morality. I have already told you that literature mostly aims at motivating the readers to do good things for the society. Why are you studying literature? If I question you, the answer to this question, very simple answer. It has got multifarious answers, but the prompt answer, which is very simple, that comes out of your lips is, I want to be a good person, so I am studying literature. So just think, it may be the simplest answer to my question, why are you studying literature? Your answer is that I am studying literature to become a good person, good individual. So literature warns that the readers should have a good soul. They should do good to the society, to the humanity. And in this way, literature wants to make the world better. 18th century fiction also maintained this spirit of motivating the readers for good jobs or good things. That's why we say that didacticism and morality are the mainstream of 18th century fiction. So these are some of the characteristics of 18th century fiction. And I think you will think and think very deeply and try to match your thinking or the consequence of your thinking with the text that you study, that is Robinson Crusoe. Now, let me share some pieces of information about Daniel Defoe with you. Daniel Defoe. It is said that his name was not originally Defoe. His name was actually Foe, as he belonged to a sophisticated or aristocratic family. He added Day, with his surname, that is Foe, and he has become Defoe, Daniel Defoe. Okay. And Daniel Defoe is an 18th century author. As we are learning 18th century fiction, he was born in 1660. That is, he was born in 17th century. And he died in 1731. That is, he died in 18th century. So he was really fortunate because he experienced 2 centuries. He was born in 17th century and he died in 18th century. He was born in 1660. 1660 is a very crucial year in the history of England because in 1660, Charles II came back to power. Charles I was executed in 1649 by the leader of Puritan party, or the Puritans, Oliver Cromwell. And Oliver Cromwell became the ruler. He was the first Commonwealth ruler. He was the first democratic ruler, though literally he was not democratic. Anyway, he became the ruler in 1649, and he died in 1658 on 3rd September. And then his son, Oliver Cromwell's son, came to power in 1658. But within 6 months, he was proved a failure. And after his failure, the people of England invited Charles II, who was banished and who was living a very luxurious life in Paris. So he was invited. And Charles II came back and he ascended the throne of England. That is called restoration of monarchism, restoration of kingship in England. And that's why we call this year 1660 the year of the beginning of restoration period. So anyway, Daniel Defoe was a journalist. He was also a merchant. And it is also said that at a certain stage of his life, he was a spy. He worked as a spy of the power structure. So just think that he was a man of multifaceted experiences. He was a man with journalism. He was also a man with mercantile experiences. And he was a son of a rich man. And he was a spy, that is, he had also political experiences. All these experiences helped him produce this text, that is Robinson Crusoe. And another important piece of information that I'd like to share with you, and that you find on the screen now, religious marginalization. He was a Presbyterian. Actually, at present, Presbyterians do not have any significant experience in the world. But during Restoration period, or even during 17th century, Presbyterians had a very important role even in the Parliament. And they were the supporters of John Calvin, who was born in 1509 and died in 1563. And John Calvin was a priest and he was a preacher of Calvinism. And the supporters of John Calvin are usually called Presbyterians, Presbyterians Christians. They were not Catholics, neither Puritans. They were Calvinists. And they were also called dissenter because they dissent or they go against the traditional Catholic belief and traditional Puritan belief. So Defoe was a member of Presbyterian Christian group of that time. And Defoe received a highly practical academy education. He was well versed in science. He knew geography. And his plain English prose was a new addition to the contemporary English language, because contemporary English language was highly sophisticated. If you go through the language of John Milton, it will be difficult for you to digest his English, because Milton's English is known as the true gem of English language. But if you read Daniel Defoe's English, you will find it simple. Now, why does this happen? It happens most probably because of his career as a journalist. Journalism always promotes simple language. If the language of journalism is difficult, it will not reach the ordinary readers or the average readers. So journalism always encourages simple language, simple, comprehensible, accessible language, accessible to the average readers. And another important piece of information about Defoe's life that may help you understand how Robinson Crusoe emerged out of his imagination. He worked extensively as a merchant in transatlantic trade, experiencing a catastrophic 17,000 bankruptcy, 17,000 pounds bankruptcy. That is, he had a loss of this fabulous amount of money in his mercantile activity. So he was a very big merchant. And as he was a very big merchant, it helped him visit different corners of the world. And that very experience helped him produce this Robinson Crusoe. Because in Robinson Crusoe, you will find the story of adventure. You will find the story of sea journey. Then let me take you to the next slide. Political defiance. It's also an important incident of his life. Defoe was arrested and sentenced to public pillory for writing a brilliant political satire against religious intolerance. So just think of this very stance. He was really a free thinker. He was not ready to be confined by the traditional religious rules and regulations. During that time, there was a very common practice of the church to control the people. Control the people. But Daniel Defoe was not ready to be controlled by the charge. So this very stance of Daniel Defoe made him a brave author. Uh, then espionage and duplicity that I have already told you that he was once doing the job of a spy in favor of the power structure. To secure his release from prison, he became a government spy. So just think that in exchange of his release, he did the job of a spy, government spy, and master propagandist, adopting aliases and shifting political allegiances to survive the cutthroat world of 18th century politics. So, to save himself, he changed his political stance. You will be surprised to know that there were more than 70 political parties in England during 18th century. And Whig Party and Tory Party, these two political parties were prominent. And these two parties always compete each other to grab the power. Tory Party was mostly the party of the royal people. The kings, queens supported Tory Party. And the Whig Party was the party of the commoners, the businessmen, and the common individuals. They wanted democracy. But the Tory Party supported royal sovereignty. And it will find the switching or shifting of allegiance, political allegiance among different political personalities of that time. For example, Jonathan Swift, the author of Gulliver's Travels, also changed his political allegiance. Once he supported Tory party, and after some unexpected incidents, he started supporting Whig party. So changing or shifting of political allegiance is also a common trait in the life of Daniel Defoe. So after knowing all these things about Daniel Defoe, I like to draw your attention to know the context of Robinson Crusoe. Actually, I am gradually taking you to this text that is Robinson Crusoe. So what is the context of what particular incident inspired the story of Robinson Crusoe or inspired Daniel Defoe to compose this story of Robinson Crusoe? I have mentioned here three dimensions. A highly publicized real-life survival story, a booming market for sensational travel writing, and a philosophical curiosity sweeping through Enlightenment era Europe. So these three are major incidents which walked behind the rise of this kind of adventure fiction. Adventure fiction was very popular at that time, remember. So the readers wanted this kind of fiction. And remember that literature, especially those who write for survival, or commercial writers highly depend on the taste of the readers. Just think of our country. Humayun Ahmed wrote many things which are not very sophisticated writings, but which are very suitable for a specific class of readers. So he wrote for a specific class of readers because he earned money. He earned money from writing. He was a university professor. He left his job and he fully depended on his writing career. And that's why he could feel the pulse of his readers and he could cater to the taste of his readers. So the taste of the readers very often decides the types of literary production or the genres of literary production. And that was also an age of philosophical curiosity, because as I have already told you that it was an age of the rise of rationalism, the rise of realism, because British navigators and merchants were going to different corners of the world. They earned new knowledge. They exchanged their knowledge with the world, and they also brought new knowledge and new ideas to their country. So that was really a very fertile period for philosophic development, epistemic development. And that's why the readers wanted some texts that would suit their philosophic mind or philosophic curiosity. Then a real incident walked behind this very text. In October 1704, after a bitter argument with his captain regarding the seaworthiness of his ship, Captain Shelcock, remember this name, Captain Shelcock demanded to be left ashore on the uninhabited island of Mas a Tierra in the Juan Fernandez archipelago off the shore of Chile. That is, Captain Shelcock, who was a captain of a ship, left the ship while his ship was in Chile archipelago, or Chile, a sea adjacent to Chile. So he left his ship. It is because of misunderstanding with the other people of the ship. But unfortunately, he lost his direction. He lost his direction. And after 4 years and 4 months, he came back to Britain. And these 4 years and 4 months, he had to spend in an isolated island. In an isolated island, he had to spend 4 years, 4 months. And he survived somehow. You know that human beings are very innovative or creative. If they fall in trouble, they create some ways to survive. So Captain Shelcock somehow survived, and after 4 years and 4 months, he came back to Britain. And then his news was published in the local newspapers. And he became very popular. His story became very, very popular among the English readers. And Daniel Defoe used that very popularity. He was inspired. So he created a story of a man. His name is Robinson Crusoe. And this very man was marooned in an island for nearly 28 years. And after 28 years, he was saved. That is, he came back to his country. But these 28 years were very productive. He created some ways to prosper. He saved the life of a Negro boy. His name was Friday. He named him Friday because it was Friday on which he saved his life from some cannibals. So he named him Friday. And with the help of Friday, he made boats. He came back. Not only that, he also went on with plantations in Brazil, and he became a prosperous man. Not only that, he also taught Friday Christianity or the Bible, and Friday became a virtuous Christian. And thus we find that even Christianity worked as a colonizing tool, or the Bible became a colonizing tool. That is, give the local people a religion, they will be busy with religion, and the colonizers stole away their resources. So I think you can interpret the relationship between Robinson Crusoe and Friday from different perspectives to understand colonial discourse. So for your sake, I have also mentioned the storyline. Yearning for the sea, Crusoe, that is, if you start reading the text, you will find at the inception that Robinson Crusoe is very much desirous to go to the sea, but his parents do not want him to go to the sea because he was their only son. They wanted that Robinson Crusoe should study law or run business. But Robinson Crusoe was very disobedient to his parents. And yearning for the sea, Crusoe leaves England in 1651. So you will find some years in this text, but never think that it is history. It's a technique. This technique is used by the author to make this story believable, okay, or convincing. His early life is marked by disaster. That is, several times the boat capsized or the ship encountered storms, and he was also assaulted by pirates, and very nearly or narrowly he saved himself, but he was quite indomitable. He was not ready to surrender to any obstacle. So just think of the spirit. Several times he encountered unexpected incidents in the sea. Sometimes he is encountered by the natural calamities. Sometimes he is assaulted by the sea pirates, but he's quite indomitable. He wants to go to the sea again and again and again. So why? Because the British colonizers went to different parts of the world by the sea, and sea brought prosperity to the British people, British merchants. And at that time, there was a very common saying, if you want to conquer the world, you have to conquer the sea. And that's why British navigation was very powerful. And it contributed immensely to uh, the development of colonial enterprise all over the world, the spread of colonial hegemony all over the world. So the British people were benefited by the sea journey or sea navigation or sea exploration. And that's why our protagonist, who is a typical British merchant, wants to go to the sea again and again and again. No obstacle, no natural disaster could stand on his way. But ultimately, a massive hurricane destroys his ship in the Caribbean, leaving him the sole survivor, marooned on a desolate, uninhabited island near Trinidad. Trinidad, I think you know this Caribbean country, Caribbean Sea. I think you know the name of the sea, Caribbean Sea, Caribbean islands. For example, Trinidad, West Indies. You are well acquainted with these names. So, in such a geographical location, he was stranded. Stranded means he was left alone after encountering hurricane. But utilizing tools, weapons, and seeds salvaged from the shipwreck, Crusoe learns to farm, domesticate wild goats, and construct a fortified dwelling. So just think of the creativity of the British people. The British people are very, very creative. They are deserted in a desolate sea, a desolate island, but they are not ready to surrender. They are always indomitable. They love to take up the challenges of life. And that's why the British ruled the world, remember. We, the people of this subcontinent, love to be slaves. We do not love to be leaders. By instinct, I do not know many reasons behind it. But so far, I have observed throughout my life, during my life of 50 or 52 years, I have found that the people of this subcontinent, by instinct, love to be servants. We are very much fond of using the words, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Where the British people love to be boss, they love to be leaders. And he will find the manifestation of this spirit in the character of this protagonist, that is Robinson Crusoe. Though he is deserted in a desolate island, he is not a man to lose his spirit. He is fighting for survival. And he survived for nearly 28 years. Not only that, he survived like a wealthy man. He did cultivation there. He also trained or domesticated the wild goats there. And he sowed seeds. He made his cave habitable. And while he rescued Friday, he taught him his language so that he could communicate with him, so that he could use him for his development, so that he could command him and make him work. So just think how creatively or how innovatively Robinson Crusoe survived. So it is quite inspiring for the young readers. Young readers like you will feel very, very inspired how to survive even in a very hostile situation. And Friday, this is not a day, remember, this is a man. Friday, a black, a Negro. One day while Robinson Crusoe was living in that very island, he found some cannibals, man-eaters, brought two persons to the island. One was slaughtered, and the other was waiting. Friday was waiting for being slaughtered. But at a certain point, while the cannibals were busy with eating up the other person, Friday started running for the sake of his life. And then Robinson Crusoe came forward with his gun and he shot one of the cannibals. And the other cannibals were frightened and they left the island. And Friday was rescued. Friday became the slave, and Robinson Crusoe became the master. So we find master and slave binary that I shared with you at the very inception of my today's lecture. So Friday always sits at the feet of Robinson Crusoe, and Robinson Crusoe always sits on a stone, which looks like a throne or chair. He's always on a high place. This is metaphorically interpreting the status of the master and the servant. The servant is always at the feet, and the master is above the servant. And you can interpret colonial discourse by using this very incident, this very episode, that is the relationship between Robinson Crusoe and Friday. You can also interpret our colonial history by using this very reference. So we will explain all these incidents more critically and more philosophically in our next classes. I just let you know the story, the storyline. So after gaining a companionship from Friday, Robinson Crusoe started thriving, and he also made boats, and ultimately he came back to Britain. They were rescued by the captain of a British ship, and they came back. And in the later life, we find that Robinson Crusoe became a very prosperous person because he cultivated land, sugarcane, especially in Brazil and other places. He had a huge amount of money, and he made also journey by the land, but the land journey was not very successful. It was full of troubles and hazards, wild animals, and villainous people. But the sea journey was more comfortable, though there were hurricanes, though there were storms, but sea journey was more profitable, more comfortable to this navigator. So you will find a contrast there also, that sea was more comfortable for the colonizers than the land. And last of all, if I ask you about the major themes of Robinson Crusoe, you will find here economic individualism and mercantile capitalism, which run into the core of this text. It is one of the major themes. And you will also be acquainted with spiritual transformation. That is, Robinson Crusoe at first was not a very good Christian. He was not a believer in true sense. But while in trouble, he ultimately developed his loyalty or his faith in God. In this way, he was spiritually transformed. And we also find how desperately he is trying to transform Friday into a good Christian. And you will also find that this novel serves as a foundational blueprint for the imperial imaginary, illustrating the early modern Western impulse to dominate the global subaltern English absolute hierarchy and erase indigenous identities. Actually, all these are the interpretations, philosophic or theoretical interpretations. That is how the natives are transformed into other, and how an outsider becomes a master our community. This is usually found in colonial practices. The colonizers come from outside as merchants or as missionaries, but very soon they become the owner of the country, and the true owners of the country, that is the natives, become other or marginalized. So we find the politics of otherization, politics of marginalization, politics of transformation. And all these politics are involved with the colonial enterprise. So actually, these are some of the important things that we know from our today's discussion or from our reflection on Robinson Crusoe. Now, let me listen to you. If you have any question, you may please question me. You may please question me.